My guest today is Dr. Mona Nemer, the Chief Science Advisor for all of Canada. Dr. Nemer has served in this role since 2017, and she is charged with providing impartial scientific advice to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. But perhaps even more impressive than all of that, she is a proud member of Shocker Nation, having graduated from Wichita State with a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry and minors in French and Mathematics in 1977. And during the fall commencement, Dr. Nemer was presented with an honorary doctorate from Wichita State University. Well, it's so good to see you, Dr. Nemer. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to come sit on this podcast. And we're looking forward to learning more about you and what you've been up to since you're here at Wichita State. So tell me about your job now. We've chatted a little bit before we recorded this. And tell me what led to where you are today, particularly how Wichita State education helped lay the foundation for your career.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor and immense pleasure to be back here on campus, which has changed so much since I've been here. But the education I received at Wichita State University has really served me well. I majored in chemistry. I had minor in math, but I took so many other classes in different disciplines, which allowed me to meet, first of all, people who are in these other disciplines, and also to really broaden my horizon. At the time, to graduate in chemistry, you even needed to have 2 language requirements. One was German, and the other one was Russian or French. And I can tell you how even this has served me well during my graduate studies, when actually some of the older literature which I needed was all written in German and in Russian. So once you go on this path of multidisciplinarity and you embrace so many different areas, then you always want to find yourself in an area, that is multidisciplinary and so on. And that's very important.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about how maybe your language skills in French come in handy to what you do today. So you came to Wichita State from Beirut. How did you find out about WSU, and what was appealing about the university 40 years ago when you came to the university?
I came to the university during very difficult times in Lebanon. I fled the civil war, essentially. And I had just started my university education at the American University of Beirut and wanted to continue my education in the American system. But coming to the United States by myself was very difficult for my parents to swallow. And they said, you can only go to places where we have family. And we did have family here in Wichita. And therefore, I looked up the university, applied, they accepted me, and here I am.
Yeah, well, we were talking earlier that one of the things that many international university students tell us why they ended up selecting Wichita State. Obviously, you had a family connection here, but they always say that Wichita State's number one out of the gate to make an offer to the students.
And this was the case as well for me. I applied to another place, the University of Florida, and Wichita was the first to send me the acceptance to my program. So that was, of course, my preference.
Yeah. So I'm sure you have a lot of memories about the university, and of course your friends and your family that you had here. But could you talk a little bit about any of the faculty experiences that you had, some of the things that just really haven't left you, that you've carried forward in your current career?
Well, many things. First, I remember the German class because not only were we learning German, but we were learning about the culture as well, and even how to sit in the classroom. So that certainly left a definite impression on me. In that class, I also met someone who was studying French linguistics. And he became my best friend because he was interpreting to me all these English expressions and that I just like didn't know. So that was I was very fond of that part. Spent a lot of time at the library. The library was really a great place to study and work, and I took many courses. So I was there very often.
Yeah. So I've talked about the language, the French language. You just mentioned that again. One of the most impressive things about your background, your current careers, is how you are providing scientific advice to the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. Tell us about that and how that is, how your office interfaces with the Prime Minister's office. What are some things that have been surprising to you, some things that are challenging, COVID-related, that sort of thing?
Yeah, of course. Before joining, before actually getting my job, I was at the university. And I thought that universities moved slowly, were siloed, and so on. I get into government, and they make universities look really good. So government is very difficult in the sense that each department is really take a life of their own. They're very different from others. The Prime Minister has to work with the ministers who are responsible for these different ministries. So I have to work as well with all these different people. So that was quite interesting because they have their own cultures and everything else. You also realize when you're providing science advice to the minister, to the Prime Minister. First of all, I have to say that, we have a Prime Minister who's really a champion of science and evidence-based policy. So that makes the job much more rewarding. I wouldn't say it makes it easy, but it makes it more rewarding. But at this level of high office, they just have so many things to deal with. They're bombarded by issues on a daily basis. So you really have also to know how to interact with them, to be crisp, to provide them the information that they need to make the decisions that they need. It's quite a learning experience. During the COVID, my office was totally mobilized for COVID. Of course, we needed a lot of science, but we needed a lot of policies, and these were quite horrific times. So we were providing both science advice in terms of different areas that needed to be looked after, because of course it wasn't only a health crisis, it was a social crisis, an economic crisis, it was an international crisis with issues on borders and everything else. So it was quite intense, I would say, and you realize the difference between science and policy. In many ways, they're almost the opposites of each other's.
Yeah. Well, my role here as president and what you're doing for Canada is certainly not parallel. But one of the things, as a healthcare provider myself and a background in public health, I'm asked to weigh in on particular issues, really help steer the university through COVID. And as you said, it is challenging at a university to do that. But one of the things that I did often was read about what was going on in the world, and Canada was one of those. Before I even made the connection of you to the university, one of the things I did is looked at what other countries were doing, and Canada was a good example of a really measured approach, I think, and a common sense approach to how COVID was being managed in that country.
I agree with you. I mean, we didn't do everything perfect, and everybody was learning as they went. But it was a measured approach, and for at least for the first 2 years of the pandemic, we managed to keep the public health imperative away from the politics. And that was very helpful. So I just don't think it's a good thing when politics gets in the way of public health, whether it's prevention, whether it's treatment, whether it's guidelines. So that's very important, and it requires a lot of discipline and a lot of will from the political side, but it also requires the scientists and the public health community to mobilize to provide the proper advice and to speak to the public as well. That was very important.
Yeah, communication was so important during that. That even when we did not have, here at the university, all the answers, regular communication we saw was so valuable. People wanted that. They wanted that assurance. And so, yeah, that's...
we were all navigating uncertainties. People didn't know whether they're going to be still alive in a month or so. Remember the horrific pictures we were getting from Europe and China before that. So they were very trying times for everyone.
Yeah. So change topics a little bit. When you received the word that we were going to give you the honorary doctorate, what was your thoughts? What did you think about the opportunity to come back here and to receive that?
Well, I mean, look, I have goosebumps right now just answering your question. I was super honored. Wichita has a very special place for me. This is where really I started my North American life, not only career. And I haven't been here in a while, so very wonderful opportunity to be back. But I was very sensitive to to my alma mater actually paying attention to me when I'm out in Canada. But I think it's also an example of how many of the international students that you have in Wichita become your best ambassadors and go out and do things. And what they learned here, both in terms of human values and, of course, academic values, actually guide them. So you have this impact way beyond Wichita and Kansas.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to tell you, you probably don't know this, but honorary degrees are approved by our Board of Regents, Kansas Board of Regents. And so I had your bio that I stood up before them to get approval. And I have to tell you that they were really taking note of your accomplishments and were very impressed. And we're just thrilled that we have someone like you who's from this university that's gone on to be in this incredible role and all the work that you've done in your research over time. So one final question. So you're in this incredible position, this position of some authority. What do you see the future in at least your world and some of the issues that you come across? What's your prognostication, I guess?
Well, we have the pandemic, first of all, is not completely over, but the pandemic has also created a lot of challenges in terms of social cohesion. It's a reminder also that we may have another pandemic due to climate change, because now we're going to start having pathogens and viruses that we haven't seen before, that we're not used to. But it's also a lesson on how to interact with the public, make sure that you're providing the proper information before disinformation gets in the way. So I'm very concerned actually about disinformation, and I'm quite concerned to see how governments are going to implement the ambitions that they have for climate change, which intersects with human development and society. So I see interesting times ahead for scholars, scientists, policymakers to work together to better this world. Yeah,
well, I think we'll be in a little bit better hands with you there, helping guiding some of this information and articulating it where people can understand, where the Prime Minister can understand, and other people on his staff to make good policy decisions for your country, and that will benefit all of us too in the long run.
Absolutely. And just to say that we have a network of science advisors in the G7 countries where we help each other. We're in close touch. And I work very closely with my counterpart here in the United States at the White House Office for Science and Technology. So we're all in it together.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's so good to meet you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll look forward to maybe another podcast in the next couple of years.
With a great pleasure.
Good to see you. Join me when I welcome my next guest, Stephen Lopper, a principal at Deloitte Consulting, as we talk about Deloitte's Smart Factory at Wichita, a groundbreaking immersive learning environment for business leaders to experience smart manufacturing solutions. Thank you for joining me today, and remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to the Forward Together podcast.